Okay, so let's talk about this media settlement, ABC, lies, communism, shared values. We have so much to discuss tonight. First, let me ask you something. Do you believe telling the truth is better than lying? And if you have kids, or maybe you are one, do you want them to tell the truth or do you want them to lie? Of course, it's obvious, it's almost a stupid question. Of course, telling the truth is better. That's just how everyone thinks, right? But that's kind of why I asked the question. Let me stop you right there for a moment. This is a mistake we on the right have made time and time and time again. It's a very human nature mistake to make. A mistake we talk about often here on the show. The mistake of putting your values, projecting your values onto other people who don't share those values at all. I just asked you if you cared about telling the truth, and of course you said yes. Well, telling the truth is better than lying, but is there a guy on the sidewalk outside of your house, or did you see one today? When you drove by, would you think if I asked him that question and he had to answer honestly, do you think he would give the same answer you did? Well, you probably say, yeah, of course. Well, everyone values honesty, but that's where you make a mistake, you see. There are people all across this planet for various reasons who do not share your values at all, not even a little bit. And the American communist most definitely does not share your values. He knows what your values are. He can see them. You're very honest about them. And so he knows he has to act as if he shares your values. But deep down inside, he doesn't share your values one little bit. And that's going to bring us to the media in this defamation case. Before I get to ABC and George Stephanopoulos, though, as an example of what I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to read you a quote. This is a direct quote from the head of NPR. Catherine Mayer is her name. And her quote was this. She was standing up on stage, giving a speech, talking to a bunch of people. This is a direct quote, Catherine Mayer. Quote, "Our reverence for the truth might be a distraction, getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done." I want you to just digest that for a moment before we go into ABC, the media, and everything else. Our reverence for the truth, for you, it's a good thing, right? And you would think the media organization would really treasure that. But the head of this media organization, in a moment of honesty, said, I have a distraction. But a distraction from what? What? A distraction from what? From reaching a consensus and getting things done. You see, you think everyone shares the values of telling the truth, but that couldn't be less true. They don't share those values at all. They know they have to act as if they share those values. But for them, the most important thing is not the truth. It's certainly not informing you. The most important thing is getting things done. And sometimes that means lying. Really, that rarely means telling the truth. And that is how the corporate media, which is all communist in this country, that's how they have operated for decades and decades. Now, it's much, much worse now than it ever was. It was always bad. There's always been yellow journalism, evil journalists. But today, all you have to do is go look at the ideology of the journalism schools in this country, and you will realize that whenever you turn on the television, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN, pick your channel, pick your publication, Washington Post, New York Times, those are all communists. They're all dyed-in-the-wool communists. And they believe getting things done is the most important thing. Oh, of course, they know they have to use phrases that kind of appeal to your values and my values. That's why they say things like, well, we have to speak truth to power. They love saying things like that. Or we have to inform voters. But remember, truth isn't secondary to these people. It's very common for us to describe it that way for them. Oh, the truth is just secondary. Truth is not involved in the equation at all. They're not concerned with that at all. They're on a mission. They're on a mission to destroy everything. And the truth, frankly, is a ridiculous thing they never even consider. And this is just how they operate. when I come into the studio every single day, I'll tell you this, when I show up here in the studio every day, I get a cup of coffee. We have a little coffee machine in this little kitchen, and I go and I get a cup of coffee. It's a matter of routine. It's just what I do. I get a cup of coffee, start looking through things. For the American media, for the corporate media, their cup of coffee is lying. They lie about everything at all times, and they always have. That's just how they do business. They're on a mission, telling the truth. And so George Stephanopoulos, a little while back, on March 10th, 2024, I don't know why I can't talk right now, sat down with Nancy Mace and said an outright lie.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and 2 separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. And any rape victim will tell you, I've lived for 30 years with an incredible amount of shame over being raped. I didn't come forward because of that judgment and shame that I felt. It's a shame that you will never feel, George. And I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not gonna do that. You know how hard it was to tell my story 5 years ago when they were doing a fetal heartbeat bill and there were no exceptions for rape, incest, or rape or incest in there? I had to tell my story because no other woman was coming forward. No rape victims were represented. And you're trying to shame me this morning.
I'm just asking.
And I find it offensive, and this is why women won't come forward.
Yeah, setting aside Nancy Mace's comments, what George Stephanopoulos said right there was a lie. And it wasn't like a shade of the truth, well, a manipulation of things. It was a black and white lie. Donald Trump was not found liable for rape. It's a black and white lie. And now we have entered a new era, and it's going to be a brutal, brutal era for the American media, who's used to having that cup of coffee. They're used to being able to simply tell those lies. Donald Trump sued ABC, and George Stephanopoulos was about to have to go sit down for a deposition under oath. He was going to have to open the books, if you will, all those emails, all those texts. What might he have found there? We don't know, because ABC, so nervous about the prospect of that, decided to go ahead and stroke a $15 million check to Donald Trump for the lie they told on camera. And in a hilarious moment of irony, that money is actually going to go to pay for Donald Trump's presidential library. You know how every president gets a library when they're done? ABC lying about Trump, they're going to pay for Donald Trump's presidential library. But that isn't even the most shocking thing about all this. Again, every single day when I come into the studio, I get a cup of coffee. It's just a matter of routine for the American media. Lying about people on the right is simply a cup of coffee. It's how they've always operated. ABC just wrote a $15 million check for what George Stephanopoulos said right there on camera, and MSNBC, after this, said the same thing.
I would just say, I mean, this feels like it has a real chilling effect. I mean, shout out to the standards department. Okay, standards is always making sure that we are keeping the bar high and substantive and accurate. But what George Stephanopoulos said in that interview, I mean, it seems to hold up with what the judge said after the fact. And now his news organization and himself, George Stephanopoulos himself, is paying $1 million of his own money to the lawyers, and ABC $15 million. It's insane.
They can't help themselves. Why can't they help themselves? Because telling lies is simply what they've always done. All communism focuses on control of information, because all communism is evil, horrible, people will hate it, and therefore they have to lie about everything at all times. Truth is not secondary to them. Truth is outright banned. It's not even allowed. They would never be able to function in any kind of a system where they had to be honest about their plans, about the results of their plans. You realize if the American corporate media told the truth about Democrats and their policies, there would be no Democrat Party. They would be so wiped out from coast to coast nationwide, the party itself would cease to exist and they would come up with some kind of a new party. That's how unpopular these people would be without an ocean of lies. Their entire existence is built on a foundation of lies. They don't know any other way. And to piggyback on this, to put a little cherry on top of this, I should say, Mark Andreessen's one of these corporate CEO types, career lib who's come out in support of Donald Trump and speaking against Democrats. He was talking about AI, artificial intelligence. And what he says here on camera is some of the craziest stuff ever, unless you accept the people we're facing are communists who believe in controlling information, all of it, at all times.
We had meetings in D.C. in May where we talked to them about this, and the meetings were absolutely horrifying, and we came out basically deciding we had to endorse Trump.
What did you hear in those meetings?
AI is a technology basically that the government is going to completely control. This is not going to be a startup thing. They actually said flat out to us, don't do AI startups. Like don't fund AI startups. It's not something that we're going to allow to happen. They're not going to be allowed to exist. There's no point. They basically said AI is going to be a game of 2 or 3 big companies working closely with the government, and we're going to basically wrap them in a, I'm paraphrasing, but we're going to basically wrap them in a government cocoon. We're going to protect them from competition. We're going to control them, and we're going to dictate what they do. And then I said, I don't understand how you're going to lock this down so much, because like the math for, AI is like out there and it's being taught everywhere. And, they literally said, during the Cold War, we classified entire areas of physics and took them out of the research community, and like entire branches of physics basically went dark and didn't proceed. And that if we decide we need to, we're going to do the same thing to the math underneath AI.
Wow.
And I said, I've just learned 2 very important things. Because I wasn't aware of the former, and I wasn't aware that you were, even conceiving of doing it to the latter.
AI, wave of the future stuff, artificial intelligence stuff. The Biden administration called in the big shots and said, don't even bother starting anything. We intend to control it all. They don't share your values at all, and they certainly don't share your reverence for the truth. Will be an interesting new world now, watching these people have to write checks for every lie they tell. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.